Black boy saves beaten millionaire. But what he whispered made the man cry. Cold night. Empty streets. A man in an expensive suit is brutally beaten by thugs and left lying on the sidewalk like garbage. No one stops. No one even looks. Except for Daniel, an 11-year-old black boy who lives in a shelter with his pregnant mother and survives by selling candy at traffic lights. Ignoring all the neighborhood warnings, he runs toward the unconscious body. He tries to wake the man, wipes his face with his own shirt, and when the millionaire finally opens his bloodshot eyes, he hears a whisper that breaks him into tears. "You remind me of my father before he died." That man is Ricardo Salazar, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country, known for being cold, arrogant, and completely disconnected from the lower classes. After being saved by Daniel, Ricardo embarks on a quiet journey to find out who this boy really is, and ends up discovering something money can't buy: humility, connection, and redemption. As Ricardo learns about the harsh life Daniel endures, he's forced to confront his own childhood wounds, his broken relationship with his father, and the past he's always tried to bury. During this emotional journey, Ricardo reconnects with an old nun who once cared for his mother. He also meets Maria, a homeless woman who used to be a teacher before losing everything, and Daniel's black neighbor, who reveals a shocking truth about Ricardo's past. But fate has one final test. Will Ricardo change Daniel's life and break the cycle, or return to the cold world he's always known? Black boy saves millionaire. Chapter 1. The Giants Fall and the Silence of the Cold City. The New York night was a cold, indifferent blanket. The skyscraper lights, symbols of power and opulence, seemed to mock the darkness that seeped into alleys and narrow streets. Ricardo Salazar, a man before whom the world bowed, felt pain in every fiber of his being. His expensive suit, once impeccable, was torn, stained with blood and mud. He lay sprawled on the sidewalk like trash, a pathetic and unrecognizable figure, beaten by muggers who had taken his gold watch and bulging wallet. The night's chill seeped into his bones, mingling with the humiliation and the awareness of his own fragility. Cars passed without stopping, their headlights briefly cutting through the darkness, revealing Ricardo's body like refuse, only to disappear, taking with them the driver's indifference. No one stopped, no one looked. Ricardo, the magnate who built empires and controlled lives, was now an invisible being, an inconvenience in the cool night he thought he dominated. His eyes, once commanding and icy, were now swollen and nearly closed from the bruising, observing, a blur of lights and shadows that refused to acknowledge him. The physical pain was immense, but the pain of invisibility, of insignificance, was a torment his fortune had never prepared him for. He was a dethroned king, a fallen titan, and the world, his stage, didn't care. Time dragged on, measured by the irregular thumps of his heart and the throbbing pain in his head. Ricardo felt the cold paralyzing his limbs, the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. Life was slipping through his fingers, and he, the man who always controlled his destiny, was at the mercy of chance, or a miracle. The scene he found himself in was the antithesis of his existence: luxury traded for filth, power for helplessness, life for the imminent threat of death. He, the man who avoided the lower classes and lived in a shielded world, was now lying, among the outcasts, waiting for help he had never offered anyone. Darkness seemed to embrace him, promising a cold and lonely end, and the street's silence was an epitaph to his arrogance. Chapter 2. The Angel Without Wings and the Whisper That broke the millionaire. The sound of running footsteps, small and bare, broke the indifferent silence of the street. A silhouette. Not a car, not a hurried pedestrian, but a boy. It was Daniel, an 11-year-old black boy, in simple clothes with a gaze that seemed to see beyond the surface. He lived in a makeshift shelter with his pregnant mother, Sophia, and earned money selling candy at traffic lights to help with expenses. Against all the neighborhood's warnings about the dangers of the night and getting involved in adult fights, Daniel didn't hesitate. His heart, bigger than his small stature, propelled him toward the inert body on the sidewalk. He had seen many people tossed aside in the street, but Ricardo's eyes, even swollen and nearly closed, seemed to call to him. Daniel ran to Ricardo, his childlike face contorted with worry. The smell of blood and alcohol was strong. He knelt beside the millionaire, trembling with cold and fear, but not repulsion. With the innocence and compassion of a child who knew pain, he began to try and wake the man. His small, dirty hands touched Ricardo's bloody face, and with his own shirt, he tried to wipe away the blood trickling from the cuts. The rough silk of Ricardo's suit contrasted with the simplicity of Daniel's cotton shirt. He spoke softly, calling to him, with a childlike voice that was a balm to Ricardo's torment. When the millionaire finally managed to open his eyes, blurry and bloodshot, the first thing he saw was Daniel's worried face, the pure light of an innocence he had forgotten. The boy then leaned in, and with a whisper that seemed to come from his soul, a phrase carrying the pain of his own experience, he said, "You remind me of my dad, before he died." The word struck Ricardo like a lightning bolt. The cold, arrogant man, distant from the lower classes, the magnate who never showed weakness, collapsed. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down his swollen face, mixing with the blood. What money could never buy, human connection, humility, and the pain of a broken heart, was being given to him by a barefoot, forgotten black boy. It was the beginning of a silent journey to discover who this angel without wings truly was. Chapter 3. The Search for Invisibility and the Echo of the Past. Ricardo woke up in the hospital, the antiseptic smell replacing that of blood and street. His body ached, but his mind was obsessed with Daniel. The boy wasn't a mirage. He saved him. But what he said, that whisper about his father and the crying fit it had caused, all of it was a mystery he needed to unravel. He used his influence to demand that the police and his security team find the boy. He wanted to reward him, yes, but he also wanted to understand. He wanted to find that face, that voice, that gaze that had broken him. However, Ricardo's search was frustrating. The police had no records of the boy. Security cameras in the area didn't show Daniel running or approaching him. It was as if the boy had vanished into the night smoke, a ghost only Ricardo could see. He felt a strange connection to this invisibility. His own life, in its luxury and isolation, had made many people invisible to him. Now he was facing his own blindness. No one seemed to remember the boy that way. That cry, that presence. Ricardo's sanity began to be questioned, even by himself. Determined to go beyond conventional methods, Ricardo began a silent journey through the city, visiting traffic lights, makeshift shelters, and alleys where life hid. He, the businessman, who always avoided the lower classes, was now immersed in a world he had ignored for so long. He smelled misery, heard the sounds of despair, and witnessed resilience amidst adversity. With every step, Ricardo confronted his own childhood wounds, his broken relationship with his father, a man who, in his own pursuit of power, had become distant and emotionally absent, and the past of scarcity he had always tried to hide beneath his armor of arrogance. The search for Daniel wasn't just an investigation, it was a journey to unearth himself, a painful path that forced him to see the humility, connection, and the possibility of redemption that his money could never buy. Ricardo. Salazar was saved by a mysterious boy, and now his life is turning upside down. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this incredible journey of mystery and redemption. Hit like if you're as shocked as Ricardo by the boy's words and his sudden disappearance. Share this video with anyone who loves a powerful story about finding humanity. Comment below. Who do you think Daniel truly is? Will Ricardo find the answers he's looking for, and what will he discover about himself? Chapter 4. The Path to the Forgotten and the Glimmer of Hope. Ricardo's relentless search for Daniel led him to places he had only ever seen from his armored car's window. The opulent skyscrapers of downtown gave way to narrow, bustling streets, vibrant with the sounds of street vendors and children playing. He felt like an anthropologist in an unfamiliar land, his expensive clothes an alien uniform in a world of worn fabrics and practical footwear. He moved discreetly, speaking to community leaders, trying to find anyone who knew a boy matching Daniel's description. Most were wary of a wealthy stranger asking questions, but Ricardo's new demeanor, less arrogant, more desperate, began to open a few doors. His investigation eventually led him to a small community center run by a kind, elderly black woman named Mrs. Elena. She ran a soup kitchen and a makeshift school for children who couldn't afford formal education. Mrs. Elena was initially suspicious, her eyes, accustomed to the empty promises of outsiders, scrutinizing Ricardo with a weary wisdom. But when Ricardo recounted the story of the explosion and Daniel's impossible appearance, her expression softened. She knew Daniel. She described him as a quiet, observant boy with an unusual ability to see things, often drawing pictures of events before they happened. She confirmed he lived in the area with his pregnant mother, Sophia. Mrs. Elena explained that Daniel had gone missing shortly after the explosion, causing concern in the community. She also told Ricardo about Daniel's mother, Sophia, a resilient woman who worked tirelessly despite her difficult circumstances. Ricardo felt a surge of hope mingled with dread. The boy was real, and his mother was pregnant. The reality of Daniel's life, so starkly different from his own, began to chip away at Ricardo's hardened heart. He was no longer just searching for answers. He was searching for a way to connect with a world he had long ignored, a world where a small boy's pure heart had saved his life. Chapter 5. The Sacred Home and the Voice of the Past with Mrs. Elena's guidance. Ricardo found the makeshift shelter where Daniel and his mother, Sophia, lived. It was a humble, crowded place, filled with the murmur of voices, the scent of simple cooking, and the fragile hope of its residents. It was a world utterly alien to Ricardo's experience, yet it was here that he felt an inexplicable pull. He saw Sophia, heavily pregnant, working diligently, her face etched with weariness but also with a quiet dignity. He observed from a distance, understanding that his sudden appearance could cause more harm than good. His next lead came from a surprising source. Mrs. Elena suggested he speak with a retired nun, Sister Agnes, who used to run a local community center and had known many families in the area for decades. Sister Agnes was known for her wisdom and her deep spiritual connection to the community, often seen as a silent guardian. Ricardo, a man who scoffed at organized religion, found himself knocking on the door of a small, unadorned house, sensing that this woman held more pieces of Daniel's puzzle. Sister Agnes, frail but with piercing, knowing eyes, welcomed him. She had heard whispers about the wealthy man searching for a lost boy. She confirmed Daniel's unusual gifts, speaking of him as a blessed child with a pure soul. But then she spoke of Ricardo's own past. She revealed that she had once cared for Ricardo's own mother when she was a young woman, struggling with her own family's financial hardships and societal pressures. Sister Agnes remembered the difficult relationship between Ricardo and his estranged father, a controlling, ambitious man who prioritized business over family. She hinted that Ricardo's coldness and arrogance were deeply rooted in his childhood wounds and his father's distant influence. The nun's words were a stunning revelation, connecting Daniel's innocent presence not just to a recent miracle, but to Ricardo's own deeply buried childhood trauma and his broken relationship with his father. The search for Daniel was becoming a search for himself, forcing him to confront the origins of his own cold heart. Chapter 6. The Broken Mirror and the Shadow of His Father. Sister Agnes's words, sharp and direct, resonated deeply within Ricardo, a painful echo of a past he had meticulously suppressed. The nun's gentle but firm revelation about his own childhood, his father's emotional distance, and the deep scars it left forced him to confront the root of his arrogance and coldness. He had built his empire as a shield, a way to prove his worth, to never be weak or dependent like he felt his younger self had been. Daniel's innocent whisper, "You remind me of my father," now took on a terrifying new meaning. Was he merely replicating his father's emotional absence, projecting his own pain onto others? The boy's words had held up a mirror to Ricardo's soul, showing him a reflection he despised. Driven by this newfound self-awareness, Ricardo started revisiting old memories, dissecting his past relationships. He remembered times he had dismissed people, trampled on dreams, or chosen profit over humanity, always justifying it as business. He saw how his own father's relentless pursuit of success had alienated him from his family, a path Ricardo had unwittingly followed. The wealthy man who had never cried now found tears welling up as he relived moments of his own emotional neglect and the coldness he had extended to others. He recognized the pattern, the inherited flaw that Daniel had. With shocking clarity pointed out, his internal turmoil was amplified by his next encounter. Returning to the community, he stumbled upon Maria, the homeless woman Mrs. Elena had mentioned, who used to be a respected teacher before losing everything. She sat on a worn-out cardboard box, sketching intricate mathematical equations in the dirt with a stick. Maria, with sharp, intelligent eyes, recognized Ricardo from news reports and public appearances. She didn't mince words. "You rich folk," she scoffed, her voice raspy from the streets. "You think the world revolves around your money? But some of us, we had something money can't buy. And you, Mr. Salazar, you look like a man who lost his soul trying to buy a price tag." Her directness, her wisdom in despair, struck Ricardo deeply. She had seen the raw ambition in him, the emptiness beneath the wealth. Maria's words were a powerful accusation, reminding him that true value lay beyond his financial ledger, and that his soul, indeed, was still very much at stake. Ricardo is facing the painful truths of his past. What will happen when he finally meets Daniel and his mother again? Subscribe to the channel to follow Ricardo's emotional journey and see if he can truly find redemption. Hit like if you're moved by Ricardo's painful self-discovery and his quest for a new path. Share this video to spread this powerful story of confronting the past and seeking forgiveness. Comment below. What do you think Ricardo needs to do to truly earn Daniel and Sophia's trust? What's the hardest truth he's faced so far? Chapter 7. The confrontation with the past and the weight of his sins. Maria's sharp and direct words resonated with the truth Sister Agnes had revealed. Ricardo was, indeed, a man who had lost his soul, driven by the very flaws he had inherited and amplified. His journey to find Daniel had become an involuntary excavation of his own past, pulling up buried resentments and unacknowledged sins. He began to confront the painful memories of his childhood, the moments where his father's coldness had shaped his own inability to connect, to feel. He realized that his constant striving for more money and power was a desperate, misguided attempt to fill an emotional void left by a distant parent. Driven by a new urgency, Ricardo sought out the parents of David, a young engineer who had worked for him years ago. David had proposed an innovative, ethical solution for a major construction project, but Ricardo, prioritizing speed and cost, had brutally dismissed his ideas, leading to the project's failure and David's subsequent severe depression and professional ruin. Ricardo had ignored his pleas, seeing him as expendable. Now, facing David's heartbroken parents in their modest home, Ricardo felt the full weight of his past actions. He saw their grief, the lingering pain caused by his ruthless decision. He stammered, attempting to apologize, but found words inadequate. The true cost of his cruelty was laid bare before him. Later, Ricardo returned to the community center. He found Mrs. Elena still serving food to the homeless. He confessed everything to her, his past mistakes, the truths revealed by Sister Agnes and Maria, and his desperate need to make amends. Mrs. Elena listened, her eyes filled with a calm understanding. She told him that Daniel had recently been found, safe, having stayed with a distant relative in another part of the city, scared by the explosion. She agreed to help Ricardo approach Daniel and Sophia, but emphasized that forgiveness was not guaranteed and that true reparation went beyond financial compensation. It required a change of heart and continuous action. The true reckoning, Ricardo realized, would not be with his past self, but with the future he chose to build. Chapter 8. The Mirror of Guilt and the Seed of Redemption. Maria's sharp and direct words resonated with the truth Sister Agnes had revealed. Ricardo was, in fact, a man who had lost his soul, driven by the very flaws he had inherited and amplified. His journey to find Daniel had become an involuntary excavation of his own past, pulling up buried resentments and unacknowledged sins. He began to confront the painful memories of his childhood, the moments where his father's coldness had shaped his own inability to connect, to feel. He perceived that his constant striving for more money and power was a desperate and misguided attempt to fill an emotional void left by a distant parent. Driven by a new urgency, Ricardo sought out the parents of David, a young engineer who had worked for him years ago. David had proposed an innovative and ethical solution for a major construction project, but Ricardo, prioritizing speed and cost, had brutally dismissed his ideas, leading to the project's failure and David's subsequent severe depression and professional ruin. Ricardo had ignored his pleas, seeing him as expendable. Now, facing David's heartbroken parents in their modest home, Ricardo felt the full weight of his past actions. He saw their grief, the persistent pain caused by his ruthless decision. He stammered, attempting to apologize, but found words inadequate. The true cost of his cruelty was laid bare before him. Later, Ricardo returned to the community center. He found Mrs. Elena still serving food to the homeless. He confessed everything to her, his past mistakes, the truths revealed by Sister Agnes and Maria, and his desperate need to make amends. Mrs. Elena listened, her eyes filled with a calm understanding. She told him that Daniel had recently been found, safe, having stayed with a distant relative in another part of the city, scared by the explosion. She agreed to help Ricardo approach Daniel and Sophia, but emphasized that forgiveness was not guaranteed and that true reparation went beyond financial compensation. It required a change of heart and continuous action. The true reckoning, Ricardo realized, would not be with his past self, but with the future he chose to build. Chapter 9. The Lowest Point and the Unexpected Embrace. The massive publicity and financial scandal brought Ricardo to his lowest point. He was in the hospital, due to a nervous breakdown, not a physical one. His career was in ruins, his name synonymous with scandal. The adulation had turned into contempt, and friends of old into ghosts. Loneliness weighed heavier than ever, but now it was a self-imposed loneliness stemming from the truth, not from arrogance. He watched his empire crumble, and with it, the life he had known. The pain of loss was immense, but mixed with a sense of liberation. As Ricardo sank into his grief and remorse, Gabriel, with his innocence and unconditional love, became his greatest comfort. The boy, oblivious to the media drama, visited his father in the hospital every day, bringing colorful drawings and stories about Lucas. He didn't see the father as a failed man or a sinner, but as Dad, the man who was now willing to acknowledge his brother. In one of their encounters, Gabriel brought Lucas to the hospital. The street boy, still in his worn-out shoes, but with a spark of hope in his eyes, sat by Ricardo's bed. There was no resentment, just the innocent curiosity of a child. Ricardo, tears streaming down his face, reached out to Lucas. "I'm so sorry, my son," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything." Lucas, without understanding the depth of the words, simply smiled and touched Ricardo's hand. In that moment, there was no millionaire, no street boy, no scandal. There was only a father connecting with a son he had abandoned. That embrace was the forgiveness Ricardo so desperately sought, the beginning of his true redemption. It was the lowest point of his life, where he lost everything, but also where he gained what the money could never buy: family and the peace of his soul. The cliffhanger was the promise of a new beginning, uncertain, but full of hope. Chapter 10. The public sacrifice and the beginning of reparation, Lucas's embrace, was the turning point for Ricardo. He had lost his empire, his reputation, the life he knew, but he had gained the peace of a soul beginning to heal. The public humiliation, which would have been unbearable before, transformed into a catalyst for his redemption. Confined to the hospital, he used the time to plan his future, not the future of business, but the future of his soul. He instructed Elena, his lawyer, to liquidate a large portion of his assets and to transfer the vast majority of his fortune to the Sophia Vance Foundation in honor of his sister. It wasn't a one-time donation, but a complete restructuring of his life, dedicating himself entirely to philanthropy and social service. The press, which once crucified him, now observed him with a mixture of skepticism and fascination. Ricardo, disregarding public opinion, began appearing on TV shows and in interviews, not to defend himself, but to publicly confess his errors, detailing his life of greed, the abandonment of Mariana, his indifference towards the homeless man, and the impact of his actions on the life of his own son, Lucas. He spared no details, nor himself. It was an act of public sacrifice, a penance before the world that shocked and divided public opinion. Many still criticized him, but others, moved by his brutal honesty, began to see a man truly repentant. As Ricardo stripped himself of his fortune and his image, Gabriel, his legitimate son, became a pillar of support. The boy, with his innocence and unconditional love, was the living proof that compassion could flourish even in the most difficult circumstances. He spent hours in the hospital with Ricardo, drawing and telling stories about Lucas, who had now become a frequent figure in Gabriel's life. The relationship between the two brothers, born from Gabriel's innocence, was the seed of a new family for Ricardo, a family built not on money but on love and forgiveness. Father Benedito and Sister Cecilia watched from afar, satisfied the millionaire's metamorphosis, aware that the true reparation was just beginning. Ricardo is at his lowest point, but an unexpected embrace might be the start of his redemption. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this unprecedented journey of redemption. Hit like if you're also moved by Ricardo and Lucas's encounter. Share this video for more people to witness the power of forgiveness and family unity. Comment below. What do you think will happen to Ricardo's family? Will he truly be able to rebuild his life? Chapter 11. Rebuilding Life and the Community's Call. After being discharged from the hospital, Ricardo didn't return to his luxury penthouse. He moved to a modest house in the same neighborhood where Lucas and Mariana lived, a decision that shocked his former colleagues and the media. His life of luxury was replaced by a routine of simplicity and hard work at the Sophia Vance Foundation. He immersed himself in social projects, working side by side with the community, listening to their needs, and using his analytical mind to create real solutions for poverty, violence, and social exclusion. His days were filled with visits to shelters, meetings with community leaders, and most importantly, time dedicated to Lucas and Mariana. The reconciliation with Mariana, Lucas's mother, was a slow and painful process. Roberto didn't pressure her. He simply was present. He ensured that she and Lucas had a safe home, access to health care, and all the opportunities that money could provide. He spent hours listening to Mariana's stories, the pain of abandonment, the struggle on the streets, the rejection by Sister Betania, who, confronted by Father Benedito and the press, was removed from her duties at the shelter. Roberto couldn't erase the past, but he could build a different future. Lucas, for his part, thrived. The presence of his biological father and his brother Gabriel brought a light to his eyes that had once been empty. He began going to school, playing, smiling in a way Roberto had never seen. The community, which had once viewed him with suspicion, began to accept him, to see him not as the repentant millionaire, but as the man who was helping. Roberto's transformation was visible in every gesture, in every word. The homeless man, Jonas, now sober and sheltered by the foundation, became a confidant, a living reminder of his past and a testament to his redemption. Roberto no longer ran from himself. He embraced his history and used it to drive change. The press, in turn, continued to document his journey, and the story of Ricardo Salazar became a global example of redemption and the power of forgiveness. Chapter 12. The Climax, the stage of revealed truth and the legacy of a name, Culmination of Ricardo's transformation occurred during a large awareness event organized by the Sophia Vance Foundation in a public square in the neighborhood where Lucas and Mariana lived. It wasn't a gala event, but a celebration of community and hope. Thousands of people attended, local residents, beneficiaries of the foundation, the press, and important figures like Father Benedito and Sister Cecilia, who came from Italy to support Ricardo. Roberto was about to take the stage to speak, but a murmur swept through the crowd. A woman with a serious demeanor but eyes that carried the pain of a lifetime approached the stage. It was Sophia Vance, Ricardo's ex-wife and Gabriel's mother. She had come not to confront him, but to bear witness. Roberto saw her, their eyes met, and a respectful silence fell over the square. Sophia walked onto the stage and took the microphone, before Roberto could begin to speak. Her voice, initially choked, resonated with surprising strength. She spoke of Lara's accident, of the pain that had consumed her, of how Roberto had shut himself off and abandoned her. She did not spare him, describing the coldness and arrogance he had shown. But then, her voice changed. She spoke of the boy, Lucas, of the Sophia Vance Foundation, of the transformation Roberto had undergone. She acknowledged the effort, humility, and dedication he had shown. Sophia then turned to Roberto, her eyes teary. "You caused immense pain, Roberto," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "But you are trying to make amends. And for Mateo, for Gabriel, for Sophia, and for Lara, I choose to believe in you." She extended her hand to him. In that moment, there were no ex-spouses, only two souls united by pain and hope. Roberto took her hand, tears rolling down his face. It was then that, from the audience, a small boy with innocence in his gaze ran towards the stage. It was Gabriel. Behind him came Lucas, now with a sparkle in his eyes that he hadn't had before. The two boys went up to the stage and embraced Roberto, forming a circle. The audience applauded, not only for the confession, but for the family uniting there, not by blood, but by a new form of love and forgiveness. The truth had been revealed, the sin confronted, and forgiveness finally found. Chapter 13. The Legacy of a Name and the Rebuilt Family. The touch of Sophia's hand in his was more healing than any medicine. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but a truce, a seed of hope planted in what was once barren ground. Ricardo understood that redemption was not a destination, but a continuous journey, a daily choice. His foundation, now active and robust, began to transform lives. Elena and her team worked tirelessly to reverse the damage caused by his old company, channeling resources into clean energy projects, shelters for women, and support for marginalized communities. Ricardo, once a feared CEO, was now a humble administrator, present at every meeting, not dictating orders, but listening with his heart. His relationship with Mariana, Lucas's mother, evolved from a plea for forgiveness into a working partnership and a friendship forged in pain and triumph. Mariana, now a strong and empowered woman, became a central figure in the foundation, using her own experience to help other vulnerable women. Ricardo ensured she had a safe home, access to health care, and all the opportunities that money could provide. Lucas, the brother who revealed the truth, grew up happy and healthy, surrounded by the love of a family he never knew he had. He was living proof that love could heal the deepest wounds. The reconciliation with Sophia, Ricardo's ex-wife and Gabriel's mother, was a delicate but significant process. The pain of Lara's loss was still a scar, but Ricardo's effort to redeem himself and the love shared for Gabriel and Lucas brought a new form of unity. Sophia became an advisor to the foundation, combining her passion for philanthropy with Ricardo's resources to create an even greater impact. Ricardo's family was no longer defined by blood ties and money, but by a complex tapestry of forgiveness, acceptance, and unconditional love, demonstrating that, even after the greatest of tragedies, hope can blossom. Chapter 14. The Price of Voy. Heaven and the echo of unconditional love years past. Ricardo Salazar, now an older man with white hair and a gentle smile, was known not for his former wealth, but for the legacy of love and compassion he had built. The Sophia Vance Foundation was a global success, transforming lives and inspiring social justice worldwide. Ricardo was frequently invited to speak, not about business, but about the journey of his soul, the price of his sins, and the joy of finding redemption through service to others. He always began his speeches with his son's phrase, "Dad, he's my brother," and ended with the proof that true wealth lay not in his billions, but in the lives he had touched and the peace he had found. Lucas and Gabriel, now young adults, were inseparable. Lucas, with the foundation's support, became a community leader, dedicating his life to giving a voice to the forgotten, just as he once had been. Gabriel followed in his father's footsteps, but with a new consciousness, using the technology for social good rather than profit. The two were living manifestations of Ricardo's redemption, the proof that love and acceptance could transcend social barriers and the secrets of the past. The story ends with Ricardo in his old age, sitting on the same park bench where he and Lara used to play. Lucas, now adult, sits beside him. The memory of Lara still was there, a bittersweet ache, but now tempered by the peace he had found in his redemption. He had lost everything material in his life, but he had gained something infinitely more valuable. His soul, his last sin, had been redeemed through love and service. He closed his eyes, listening to the sounds of the park, the children's laughter, the bird song, and in his mind, he heard again the cry of a barefoot, desperate black boy. "Don't get in the car!" But now, the cry was not a warning of death, but an eternal echo of life, of hope, and of the soul he had finally found. Chapter 15. The legacy beyond the end. Roberto Salazar's life didn't end with the silence on the park bench. The legacy he built spread like ripples in a pond, touching countless lives. The Sophia Vance Foundation, under Lucas and Gabriel's leadership, became an unstoppable force for social change, a symbol that power, when used with compassion, can heal and transform. The young engineer's clean energy projects were finally realized, lighting up entire communities and honoring the memory of his lost vision. Shelters for women experiencing violence flourished, offering safety and hope to hundreds of Marianas. Roberto's story, told in books and documentaries, became a vivid reminder that true redemption isn't about escaping consequences, but about embracing them and transforming them into a greater purpose. The arrogant millionaire became the man with a redeemed soul, and his name, once tarnished, was now associated with hope and service. He taught the world that shame and guilt can be overcome, that forgiveness, both given and received, is the key to true freedom. The final scene of the script is a tranquil cemetery, where Roberto Salazar's headstone rests beside Lara's, with a simple inscription: "Where love and forgiveness bloom, the soul finds its true home." On a sunny day, Gabriel and Lucas, now adults with their own families, visit the graves. They tell stories to their children, Roberto's grandchildren, about the strong woman, Dona Antonia, who taught dignity, about the cry of a boy who saved a soul, and about the man who, by losing everything, found heaven on earth. The echo of "Dad, he's my brother," was no longer a cry of pain or revelation, but a song of unconditional love that transcended generations, proving that the legacy of a redeemed soul is eternal. We've reached the end of this emotional journey of redemption. If Roberto's story and his family's journey have moved you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming stories of life and overcoming adversity. Hit the like button if you believe that true wealth lies in love and forgiveness, not in money. Share this video so more people can discover the power of transformation and hope. Comment below. What lesson do you take away from Roberto's story? Do you believe everyone can find redemption?